Well, welcome to Almost Live. My name is Amy Amantea. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Community Outreach Coordinator for VocalEye, your host for these Almost Live VocalEye events, and a member of the blind community. I want to take a moment tonight to acknowledge that VocalEye is broadcasting to you all this evening from the unceded, ancestral, and occupied territories of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples. And as we're all gathered over Zoom this evening, the magic of Zoom, I invite you all to take a moment to acknowledge the lands that you may be settled on. I know I feel honored to live and to work and to play on these lands. So tonight, as many of you know, we are on the eve of the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, and wanted to share with you some additional information tonight. So the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation responds to a call to action number 80 from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's call to action. So this reads as follows. I'm just going to share with you what call to action number 80 is. We call upon the federal government, in collaboration with Aboriginal peoples, to establish as a statutory holiday a national day for truth and reconciliation to honor survivors, their families, and communities, and ensure that public commemoration of the history and legacy of residential schools remains a vital component of the reconciliation process. For me, I'm going to take tomorrow as the opportunity to recognize, to learn, and to reflect on the intergenerational harm that residential schools have caused to Indigenous families and their communities, and to honor those who have been impacted by this injustice. That's part of the work that I'm going to do, is to do some research and to learn and to go ahead and read through all 94 calls to action, which I have not done, and I'm embarrassed to say I have not done it, but that is going to be the bulk of my day tomorrow. And I would like for Rick to share a video that has been recorded by Deanna, who is a brand new intern. You all met Deanna last week with us at VocalEye, and Deanna's got some words to share. So Rick, I'll have you play that video.
Hello, everybody. My name is Deanna Gestrin, and I'm a First Nations woman in my mid-40s with shoulder-length black curly hair, and I'm wearing an orange shirt that says "Every Child Matters." I am a new intern with VocalEye Descriptive Arts, and I'm really happy to be here to talk to you a little bit about truth and reconciliation. I want to let you know that truth and reconciliation efforts are not to address problems of the past. For me, they are really about addressing current problems. We want to acknowledge the past, but currently people in the First Nations communities are struggling with the effects that the residential school system had on families, had on trust and family dynamics, upbringing for children, and connection with Canada as a whole, but also within their own communities. There's a real disconnect and a divide that happened because of that system. And for me personally, my mother and my grandfather went to residential school. And when I think about that, and when I go to the school to be on those grounds, I think about how afraid they must have felt, you know, and how disconnected they must have felt to be taken away from their families and to be taught things about their families that were, number one, untrue, and number two, really not supportive of building connection or continuing connection within that family grouping. So I think it's really important that as a society, we are looking at this history and we are looking at ways to move forward, to redevelop the relationships that First Nations and Indigenous people in Canada have with the rest of the community. This is a marginalized group of people, and I think we have a real responsibility as Canadians to support the people who have been hurting for 7 generations. So what does 7 generations really look like? It means that the Indigenous people in our country have not been removed from residential school, any of them, at any point in their life. For 7 generations, people have come through that school system. All Indigenous people are related to people who came from the residential school system. That represents many years of trauma and mistrust and a breakdown of culture and family systems. The impact is enormous. And as a Canadian, I look at that as an opportunity for me to say, okay, now I know to do better. I want to be aware. I want to look for opportunities to be proactive and take action, maybe through conversation, maybe through donation, maybe through, some kind of political involvement. I think there are a lot of ways to show up for First Nations people at this time. When a family member is hurt or harmed, the community rushes in to protect. And I feel as a Canadian and as a mixed heritage Canadian that I have a responsibility in that same way to kind of protect, to really hold close the values of these people and try to honor moving forward to do things in a different way. Thank you for having me here today, VocalEye. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to work with your organization. And I just want to wish everybody well this evening, all my relations.
Thank you, Deanna, for those impactful words and the advice, because I think it's really important for us to know as settlers, as uninvited guests, how we can take steps to move forward to remove harm. I would love for Rick now to just play one more video for you all in observation of truth and reconciliation. And this is a short video maybe that would provide some resources and opportunities for you to explore how you can take action. So go ahead, Rick, and please play the video.
So what is reconciliation anyway? There's a number of things that are not reconciliation. Hiring more Indigenous peoples is not reconciliation. Having more artwork in offices is not reconciliation. We should already be doing these things.
Before how I can help comes as a question, I think they first need to understand.
All you need is access to Google, and you'll be able to get onto the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's website and read the report. And even if you don't want to read it, you can read it in YouTube videos, have it read to you.
And then not just know the truth, but there's the justice part where you actually address and make amends for everything that's happened and is still happening.
The reality is that First Nations kids are still getting between 20 to 50% less funding across every public service.
So until there's no more murdered and missing Indigenous women or our people over incarcerated in prison, how can we skip forward to the fun reconciliation part of things?
There is no federal plan to eliminate those inequalities. And some people say, well, there must be a reason for this. But let's take boil water advisories. The Government of Canada can get a DART team in the air, fly them to an earthquake zone halfway around the world and get clean water pumping in 24 hours. So why can't they do that for First Nations communities in Canada? We're making choices to allow the racial discrimination to continue. And that's what we need to stop.
We will never get to real truth, justice, and reconciliation until there is a substantial transfer of power, wealth, and resources. And that means lands have to come back. That also means there has to be us sharing in the resources. And it also means a recognition and full implementation of our sovereign right to be self-determining.
When you think about the greatest human rights abuses that were done in Canada, the Chinese head tax, the internment of Japanese Canadians, and residential school, they all have two things in common. First, they were all perpetrated by the Canadian government. And second, we all let it happen because we couldn't watch the injustice and speak up and do something about it. Reconciliation is our chance to learn how to not turn away.
If I help these people in professional positions or positions of power understand what it is Indigenous people have been going through and have gone through, it's going to help my children in school right now. It's going to help their children, and it's going to help, 7 generations.
That's why I never talk about reconciliation without talking about truth, justice, and reconciliation. You won't get that from hanging artwork in an office.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit tvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.
Thanks, Rick, for playing those videos. And thanks all of you for giving us the space and making space in your lives for this important conversation. This is just the beginning of this conversation. And Deanna's going to stick around with us this evening after we wrap up our audio play and our Q&A with our special guest. If you have questions that you would like to ask in a safe space, in a safe way about truth and reconciliation, about how you can make change, about what it is you can do as an individual or what we can do as a collective, I invite you to stick around for that conversation. I think it's a really important conversation to have. So I invite you all to do that. Okay, friends, I'm going to turn our focus and thank you for the space. Tonight, I want to share with you on this Wednesday, September the 29th, our 57th Almost live event. And it is a Arts Club Theater Company's Listen to This audio play. We've heard a whole bunch of them in this series, and this is another one. This one is entitled Mala, and it's a one-woman show about family ties and the limits of love, we'll say. So joining us this evening is performer, and I'm going to say voice talent because we don't get to see her tonight, we just get to hear her tonight, is Carmen Aguirre. Welcome, Carmen. You're in the space. I know you are.
Okay, yes, I'm here. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here this evening. We've had a couple of other audio plays from the Arts Club shared with us in this space, and I've always had like the playwrights share, which is fantastic, but we've never had one of the performers share. So I'm wondering if I can just start off by asking you a bit about who you are as a performing artist. You know, do you do mostly stage, or do you do film and television, or do you voiceover? You probably do it all, but I'm curious.
Yes, I do it all. I suppose I could say that I do mostly stage. I went to Studio 58, the professional theater training program. Incredibly, 31 years ago, I started the program there, and I graduated in 1993, so a long time ago. But yes, I do it all, and mostly stage.
Mostly stage. So what was it like to transform? Everybody had to pivot during this pandemic, artists included. You had to sort of transform into a voice performer. So what was that like for you doing this piece?
Oh, I do the same thing that I would do with any other form of performance. So I tackle the script the same way that I would if I were doing it on stage. So I do a lot of text analysis. That is to say, I really break down the text for myself to figure out what the character wants, what's standing in her way, what's at stake for her, what are the things that she's doing to try and get what she wants. In a play like this, the relationship with the audience is everything. There is no fourth wall. So she's talking directly to the audience all the time. That's the relationship she's in. So it's really about what is she trying to do to the audience? What is she trying to communicate to the audience? What is she trying to have the audience walk away with at the end of the story? So those are the kinds of things that I ask myself in general, but in this case, certainly with this piece, where it's all about the relationship to the audience.
I think we're going to have a lot of stuff to talk about when we get to our post-listening party Q&A, because I'm so interested in some of this exploration about these things and these types of pieces. So stay tuned for that, friends. So Carmen, the piece Mala itself, I wonder if you can give us a little bit of a highlight of what we're going to experience here tonight.
Oh, that's difficult without giving stuff away.
No spoilers, no spoilers.
Well, it's written by a Cuban American woman called Melinda Lopez. It's a contemporary play. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful play. It's a meditation, I would say, on grief. And what's great about it, in my view, is that it's completely unsentimental. Yeah, so that's how I would describe it. It's an unsentimental exploration of grief.
Is that in the writing, Carmen, or in the acting choices, or in both?
No, in the writing. It's in the
In the
writing.
writing.
So as an actor, your job as an actor is to serve the writing.
Yeah.
So that's why you have to do so much work on the text, like studying the text, breaking it down into units and beats, really trying to figure out what the playwright wants from you.
Mhm.
And then you just have to serve it, and so almost immediately, like the first time I read the play, I was very taken by it. I understood right away that it was unsentimental. It was an unsentimental exploration of grief, and that it was pretty culturally specific. The voice, in my view, is very Latina, which is what I am, in terms of its dark humor and its dry sense of humor and its directness.
Oh, okay. I'm
Yeah.
really excited to experience this. Is there a content warning we should provide for our guests in the space tonight?
Let's think. And it's very hard for me to provide those because I don't know anymore what should be considered a content warning, but
Fair.
it's about grief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, we always go into these things sort of with the understanding that there could be adult language, there could be just about anything. So I'm sure that folks won't be surprised if they come across something, but it's always just a nice heads up if folks feel
Yeah, it's not a
like they're triggered.
TYA show. Let's put it this way. It's not a theater for young audiences show. It's not a family, it's not a show where that is geared towards, hey, bring your 5-year-old. Not at all. It is meant for adults, for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you're going to stick around, come back and join us. The running time is approximately 70 minutes. And so thank you, Carmen. We'll invite you back for the Q&A after the listening party. Friends, I invite you to sit back and relax and enjoy Mala.
VocalEye Almost live. Mala. Due to copyright policy, this audio play is not currently available.
Awesome. Welcome back, friends. That was Mala. I'd like to bring Carmen back into the space. Carmen, where are you, my friend? We're about to start our Q&A with Carmen, who is the performer in this piece, a solo one-person show. A lot of work goes into that, no doubt about it. So, Carmen, we've got you?
Yes.
Awesome.
Can you hear me? Yes.
I can hear you. And I can see your video up there. So thanks for coming back. And folks, this is your opportunity, just as a reminder to the community, to raise your hand if you have any questions or want to share your comments about what you experienced tonight with Mala. I'm just going to kick things off with Carmen while I wait for some hands. First of all, congratulations, Carmen. It's a really beautiful piece. And I really get what you meant by this exploration of grief from sort of an unsentimental kind of place. And I guess, we had touched a bit about this at the top when we introduced this piece about the process of, I guess the process of being an actor with an unsentimental piece, and whether you make choices differently depending on, because I identify as an actor as well, and I'm always looking for intent, but sometimes unsentimental to me feels like there is no intent. It's just like reading the telephone book, but it's not. There's lots of layers here. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your process.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like I was saying earlier, I approach every time I approach it the same. I do all of the text work in terms of deciding what she means, where she's coming from, what the subtext might be, why she's saying this at this time, as opposed to focusing on any kind of emotion or feeling. I believe that if you're a properly trained actor, and your instrument is properly trained, you are able to be vulnerable. And by playing the action and by playing the reality of what the character is saying, the vulnerability will be there. And if that leads to some emotion, then that's great. but I never play emotion. I think that that is a mistake.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's one of the things too that that I learned in acting, and as a constant reminder, even as I embark on new things in my own acting career, is you don't play emotion. You know, you let the emotion sort of live within you. But if you play the intent, sometimes that arises you in a different way. So thanks for providing that context. We already have a couple of hands. I have so many questions, but let's just turn
Okay.
it to our group. So we've got Lori. We'll do Lori first, and then Megan. So Lori, go ahead and unmute yourself.
I'm already unmuted.
Oh, great. There you go. You're ahead of the game.
I really want to think this is a really good performance. It made me think a lot of my mom, because she's been gone almost 6 years now. And so this, what you had to say made me think a lot of things I know that she was probably saying towards the end of her life and everything. So just, you talk about emotions, it really brings things up, you know, that never got said or got done during the end of her life. So I want to thank you for a wonderful performance.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
That's great, Lori. Thanks for sharing your comment. Megan, how about for yourself? You can unmute. Just give Megan a moment to unmute here. While we're waiting for Megan, Carmen, you at the top of
There
again.
we go.
Oh, never mind. Let's take Megan. Go ahead, Megan.
Okay. Well, I really liked it because it's I like how like all of a sudden you knew the Spanish, and like you actually, the accent was perfect, and I love that. But I didn't know that, like in the 7, like usually in Cuba and these times, they don't the mothers don't hit their children. They just, you know, they speak firmly to them. But I guess there was some time where they had to, but usually they're so sweet, you know. I you know, but anyway, that was amazing. How did you? Were you born speaking Spanish, or did someone teach you Spanish, or?
Oh, yeah, no, I was born in Chile in South America. So Spanish is my first language.
Oh, okay. Ah, so you do so well with that. I love it.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Megan, for your comment and question.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
it leads right into what I wanted to talk about, which is this whole idea of cultural representation in a piece like this. So you had mentioned, again, this piece was written by a Cuban writer, and you've identified to us that you identify as Latina. And so I wonder about, you know, how much of your culture you bring into a piece like this, and whether it resonates with you, or whether it's like, well, I know that's some people's experience, but it wasn't my experience. Like, where's that sort of that line in a piece like this for you?
Yeah, well, it's impossible not to bring your culture into any piece, you know. I spent most of my career feeling like I had to chop off entire parts of myself in order to be in any rehearsal hall, because very often I was the only racialized person in any given project.
Mm-hmm.
None of us is neutral, right? We all have a culture. So when it came to this piece, I think it's what I said before, because the writer is Cuban American and she's written a Cuban American character, there's definitely a cultural specificity in the actual writing in terms of the directness, the dry sense of humor, and the lack of sentimentality. So that is absolutely, I would say, culturally specific to Latinx people.
Mm-hmm.
So I could definitely go right in, you know, and not have to overthink that, because that's definitely my culture, right? And I think that's, I mean, I'm sure that's why Ashley hired me to do this piece. You know, I'm pretty sure that she wanted a Latina woman to do the piece. So that's why I came on. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious. Was that you don't have to share if this is not a fair question to ask, but you just said that Ashley invited you. So does that mean that you were at the top of the list for the arts club to reach out to, or did you have to audition for this? With
No, I did an
a
audition.
Oh, you did do an audition? No.
No, I did not. I did not.
Well, there you go. I mean, like that just tells me how top of your game you are in general, that you're being invited to do projects, because that's sort of like every artist's dream is to
Right.
be invited to do projects and to
Well,
skip the whole audition process.
yeah, I think you reach a certain age where if you've been doing it for 30 years and you've proven yourself, you know, you kind of want to say to people, you know, not all the time, but in many circumstances, I would just say, like, I'm just not going to audition for that. If you want to give me the role, go ahead. If not, don't worry about it.
my body of work is my audition. You know what I can do. Yeah, absolutely. We've got a hand from Nancy, so we'll go to Nancy and then we'll follow with Josette. So go ahead, Nancy, and unmute yourself. Sometimes it takes a moment for folks to unmute in this digital world of ours. Was the rehearsal process?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Nancy.
Oh, I don't like this phone. Oh, it was a good story. I really enjoyed it. I like how you had sounds at the background of what's happening and everything else, and that, you know, all the sounds made it more, even though I couldn't see it, but it sounds so good. It reminded me of my mom, we're East Indian, and I sat on her bed and said how much I loved her, and because I talked too fast, she goes, I don't understand. I don't understand. I go, then I got, when after she passed away, I realized I talked too fast. Maybe she never did understand what I was saying. So the story brought me back memory of all the things that you said. Now, this is a true story?
No, I didn't write it. I'm just the actor in it. And the playwright is, I think she lives in Boston. I'm pretty sure she lives in Boston. I'm assuming it's I mean, I know it's fiction, but I think like all writing, I'm sure it's based on some kind of personal experience.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I like being East Indian. I like how our parents, we're supposed to look after our parents out, you know, when we get older. And now this generation, our children don't want to look after us, even though if I want to live next door, there's not that generation anymore. So that it was a nice story. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. I know when my grandmother died at the age of 94, and she spent the last 6 weeks of her life in hospice, and she didn't say a word to anybody. She was, for all intents and purposes, awake but not responsive. And I flew out from, they live in Calgary, I flew out from Vancouver and I spent a couple of days with her and I just chatted. And the only thing she said in that 6 weeks is, she talks a lot. Referring to me. Those were her last words. She talks a lot. So Nancy, that resonates with me when you talk about how your mother, you said you talk so fast. My grandmother just said I talked a lot. So Josette, you're up, my friend.
Yes, hi. I have a couple of comments about the character herself. I got the impression that in some ways she didn't know how to handle what was happening in regard to her mother's death coming up, and also when her father passed away, she neglected to say to him what she, you know, might have wanted to say, and so she she did say that she loved him after he had passed away, but I wonder if she regretted not communicating with him just before his death. And also in regard to her mother, I realize this is just a play, but wondered if she had a difficult time coming to terms with how to handle the situation. And lastly, my own mother had dementia before she passed away. I wasn't there, but she had a massive stroke, and I don't know, I just chose not to be there because I couldn't communicate with her anyway when she was in the hospital. But I did talk to her a lot just before that, and there were a lot of difficult things, such as her saying some negative stuff, and I knew it wasn't her fault because she had dementia, and people can't help it. So I just did what I could, and gently said things to her like, "Oh, no, Mom, that wasn't true, and you've mentioned this before," and they repeat a lot of stuff. So anyway, I really enjoyed. Excuse me, I've got bronchitis. I really enjoyed the play, and I just thought it was really, really well done, and you did an excellent job with it as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Josette.
Thank you very much.
Carmen, any thoughts about that? I recognize that this is a work of fiction and that you're the actor, but any of that resonate with you in terms of this experience around grief, and whether you think how the character was dealing with it?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that the play is not, doesn't tie the grieving process up with a little bow, I think it really captures how messy it is and how it's never ending, and how she feels so much regret about how she deals with pretty much everything, this character. And I think that we can all relate to that for sure. That's what I like about the play, is that I think it does a very good job of exploring the messiness of grief.
Yeah, that's right. And taking the time necessary to do that sort of from different angles, which is kind of nice too.
Yeah.
We don't often get an opportunity to immerse ourselves in that kind of content.
Yes.
So I appreciate that. We've got a hand from my list says Louise and then Sharon. Oh, no, Sharon first. Pardon me. Sharon and then Louise. Go ahead, Sharon.
Thank you. It was wonderful, wonderful acting. So thank you. And I had two questions. One is, obviously I would imagine it's a much different doing an audio play rather than, being on the stage. I wondered if you could comment on that. And also, was it done sort of in one take? I mean, is it done like in this, you start at the beginning and go through, or do you do it over multiple days?
Yeah, those are great questions. So yeah, when we were recording it, I was really sad that we weren't doing it live with an audience every night, because the whole play, I mean, the most important character in any play, but particularly in a play like this one where there's no fourth wall and she's talking directly to the audience, the most important character is the audience. So I kept going, oh, it's so sad that there's no actual audience to talk to who would be laughing at certain points or possibly crying at certain points, or just the live element of an audience. And no, we didn't do it all in one take. We did it over, oh boy, I think it was over 5 days, and 2-hour sessions each day. So I did a lot of prep beforehand, a lot of prep, so that when I went in with the director, Sherry Yoon, who's marvelous, we would just do, I would do a take of a section. She'd give me a few notes. I would do it again, and usually it would be done. Each unit it took 2 or 3 takes, and then we would continue over a period of about 5 days. And then, of course, she went away and put it all together. And, this fabulous sound designer and composer, Jolisa Pancania, her design was added in that post period.
Yeah, that was one of my questions. Did you know where the sound cues were, or they just did that all afterwards?
No, they did that all afterwards.
That's the magic of post-production.
Right. Yeah. Really wonderful. Thank you.
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
The audio stuff was very timely placed to help emphasize moments in the story, which was really nice. Carmen, just before we go to Louise for her question, share with us what you mean by notes, because folks may not know what it means for an actor to receive notes. Because I think oftentimes, the perception is the director says, do it this way, do it that way. So what's that process? What's that dialogue like between a director and an actor, or I guess maybe for this process?
Sure. When you're an actor, you come into the first day of rehearsal having done a ton of prep already. So you come in with a ton of ideas and you just throw yourself into it. And then the director sees what you've got and they give you feedback, right? So they go, let's try it this way instead, or let's try it that way instead. What action are you playing there? Why don't we try a different action? What do you think was happening right before for this character? Okay, let's bring more of that into this unit or into this beat. So it's a real collaboration / conversation as far as I'm concerned. But it has to start with the actor coming in already with a whole bunch of work done and with a bunch of ideas, so that the director has something to work with.
Right. And I'm sure the director probably does a lot of homework too before they come in, so that collaboration process can sort of just, that discussion can happen instead of you trying to figure it out in these 2-hour chunks of time, right?
Yes.
Time's precious.
Yeah. I mean, as you know, Amy, the director comes in with a vision, right? And most of the time when you're directing, hopefully you have at least 6 months to prepare. Usually more than that. So yeah, the director comes in fully knowing what they want, but also open to whatever the actor is bringing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for providing us with that context. I think it's really nice that having an actor in the space who can speak eloquently to how that process works for folks who don't know, or maybe folks who might want to give acting a try sometime.
Right. Yes, true.
Right? Louise, you have a hand, my friend. I'll give you a moment to unmute. Oh, you're fast.
I'm here. Thank you so much. Though I have my parents alive still, and, watched them many different times and ready to let my dad go a couple different times. And things turned around for the positive. I mean, and it's been good. But what I'm saying is it really, it's what I perceived is not just what you did, it's how the language of it was written. We as people, as humans, don't know when tomorrow's coming and what's coming tomorrow. We have to be, and we don't sometimes accept what is going to happen tomorrow. And that came across so strongly in it that about her mother and her father, it was like there was no, well, they're going to die tomorrow. Okay, what am I going to say goodbye to them? No, it's reality that you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. They're going to be here for another month, another year, or 6 years. What this piece did for us, or for me especially, it tells us we have to come to terms that we should lose our parents before we die. Our parents shouldn't lose a child. And that we have to come to terms with grief and how we handle it. And that was, and the story was fantastic to give you that point of view of it. I mean, the last time I saw my grandmother alive, and she was the only grandmother I had. I only had one set of grandparents. My dad's parents were dead before I was even born. But my mom's parents were both alive. And my grandmother, I made her dinner. Next night, she ended up having a massive heart attack, going in the hospital. It wasn't because of me, but she ended up being a vegetable for a few months, and I didn't go see her, but I got to go say goodbye to her. But the reality of that is, I didn't know when I went to bed that night that I was never going to see her alive again.
Yeah.
So we all have to appreciate and grieve through whatever's going on in our lives. We have to let that grief come into our lives. And I think though the character couldn't show the grief, you could hear the grief. And that you did a fantastic job with that. Though you say there was no grief in you or in the character, yes, there was. There was a different kind of grief. The grief of not knowing how to cope. And that's how I heard it. That's how I heard it, was the grief of not knowing how to deal with life, how to deal with what was the most important part of her life. Does that make sense?
Oh, completely. Yes, I agree. Yeah, yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Louise. And I think it's also a great reminder too to like live life in the moment, right? Because like you said, we're not promised tomorrow. So today is all we've got.
Yeah.
So to enjoy that to the best of our abilities. Carmen, what would you say to the relationship of the sisters? I mean, they were coined as sort of good cop, bad cop, and yeah. What is your lens on that relationship that the sisters have?
Well, I think it's very real. It's very, it's complicated. And I liked, like the rest of the script, I like that it was just, these are real humans. They're complicated humans. They're nuanced, you know, the relationships are nuanced, which is why I think we can relate to all of them and to all those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Sherry, the director, and I kept referring to the sister as mouse blood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to read through the script, with transparency, because I do some work with the arts club. So they had asked me to read through the script, and I have to tell you that I was using my screen reader to read through the script, which speaks like a computer to you and is awful hard to listen to for an hour. So listening to you perform it really brought those words to life, and that was a real joy. When a performer is good at what they do, you're totally immersed into it. And I love these moments of when you turn into the mother and you revert to the Spanish language. And I love the symbolism behind Mala being like an evil person.
Yeah.
And how, because that is not like, when you see the title, you think Mala is going to be the name of the main character. Like this is the name of the character, but there's really so much, there's so many layers to that. Bringing your culture into this, was that something that resonated with you because for me, it's the first time I've heard this, because I don't have a Latinx culture. It's not my lived experience. So I can't find a parallel for that for the white person, other than my very Catholic Italian grandparents who would always tell me I was going to hell, basically. So like bring in, but that was the same thing for them, that I was a bad person because I wasn't married and this was going to happen to you. But from a cultural perspective, I'm so curious about whether that was something that you feel really resonated with you, or whether that was something that maybe resonated more with the author or the writer of the piece.
You mean
the whole idea of Mala? Yeah.
Sure. I mean, do you mean like from a religious point of view? Is that what you mean?
Is it a religious thing or is it a cultural thing? I don't know.
Well, it is a cultural thing, but I don't know. I think that there's a very limited understanding of Latinx culture in North America. And so quite often the very little that people know about Latin America is based on racist stereotypes that they've seen on screen.
Mm-hmm. The disability community knows that one well too.
Yes,
so
yes,
resonates. Yes.
Yeah. So mostly you don't see Latinx people, much less Latinx stories on screen, for example, right? But when you do, it's, the hapless victim or the dangerous criminal, or hypersexualized women. And one of the stereotypes of Latin America is that it's devoutly Catholic, for example.
Okay, Google, what time is that?
And that's not true.
Right.
There are millions and millions and millions of Latin Americans that are atheist, that are Jewish, that practice all kinds of different religions, the Afro-Cuban religion, Santeria, the Afro-Brazilian religion, Candomblé, and even Latin American Catholicism is not what in North America would be referred to as Catholicism, right? It's actually Catholic iconography with indigenous and African practice. So I don't know why I got into that in terms of the word mala. But in terms of the language, yeah, it would just be the equivalent of the word bad. You're a bad person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really exactly what I was looking for you to sort of draw parallels to is,
Yeah.
I think sometimes, again, if you're not a part of the culture, like I'm clearly not, there's this sense of like, it's a one size fits all. So that, a word like mala is going to resonate with every person on the planet that identifies as Latinx,
Right.
which may not be the truth. Right. And so thank you for providing that little bit of context, because I think it's super important for us to know, if for those of us who don't identify as a member of that culture. So what's next for you, Carmen? What's coming up for you next?
Oh boy, God, a lot, I suppose. Currently, I'm doing a lot of writing of plays that are coming up. I work at Stratford at the moment as an artistic associate of new play development. So I'll be going to Stratford in a couple of weeks for 2 weeks to do some workshops there. Yeah, really needing to get, dealing with a bunch of heavy playwriting deadlines. So that's my big, that's my big focus, or at least it should be.
Gosh, it sounds like a lot, but it also sounds super exciting. And so thank you. I mean, because you've got a lot going on your plate, an extra big thank you from me and the community for joining us here in this space tonight, because I know that you've got a lot on your plate. And but we really appreciate you bringing the context and the offering of your time to share your thoughts on this piece and to listen to some of our audience share their thoughts.
It's so great to be here. So thank you for having me.
It's fantastic. With that, Carmen, a sincere thank you. Before we let you go, we have a prize draw this evening. And then folks, I'm just reminding you all that Deanna is going to join us for folks who want to stick around and have some chat about truth and reconciliation. So I invite you to do that, Carmen, if you're welcome to stay, if that fits in with your schedule this evening. But let's bring Sarah in. Our prize draw this evening, folks, is, well, we're back to the usual thing that we do, which is we'll connect with you after the prize draw to find a prize that is localized to your area. So Sarah, I'm going to leave Carmen in your hands to go through this prize draw.
Hi, Carmen.
Hi.
Whenever you're ready, please shout out your word and we'll pick the name.
Okay, so at any point I can shout out the word?
Yes, at any point.
Okay, mala.
Our winner today is Barbara Campbell.
Barbara!
Yay!
Barbara's still on the call with us?
I believe so, yeah.
Give Barbara a minute to chime in, maybe? Well, Barbara, we'll connect with you via email or telephone and figure out what your prize is and how we get it to you. So thanks for joining us. And Carmen, thanks very much again for joining us in the space this evening. It's been a real privilege and a real pleasure.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here, and good evening to everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye for now. Hopefully we'll see you again.
Yes, hopefully.
We're going to transition and bring Deanna into the space, friends. And again, I would invite you to join in the conversation. We'll maybe spend 10 minutes with Deanna talking about truth and reconciliation. So Deanna, where are you, my friend? There you are. How are you this evening? First of all, before we get into this conversation, I would love to just know how you thought about this play this evening.
Oh, I thought it was, well, I agreed with a lot of what people had to say. It was just really neat to hear the perspective. It was neat to hear the connect, and also to feel the cultural element. Like when she goes to the Spanish speaking role, I felt like I was more involved in the piece rather than reading something or watching something. It just felt more personal.
Is there a parallel for Indigenous folks in any of this content? Something that resonated for you in terms of this process of grief or directness or any of that?
Listening to people speaking back about their own memories, I guess that's what I was relating to. When people were talking about, like, when my grandmother passed, or this is what I felt, it made me reflect on, okay, well, I've had a similar experience, or I relate to that piece of it, just the emotionality in relationships and how they end up at this place. that's about the loss, but it's also about like all the living memories, you know?
Yeah, living memory is hugely important. And I think that's probably something we can transition into talking to when we talk about truth and reconciliation. And I really would love to, put the microphone, put the torch, whatever symbol you want to use in your hands to kick us off with this conversation, because this is the lived experience of your family and your community and not mine. And so how do we start, Deanna, in terms of learning, and where do we go, and what questions do we ask ourselves?
I've been thinking about that over the past hour or so, like how can I give some guidance? I think it's like anything else. When we don't know about something, we seek the information, and there's a lot of ways to do that. So what I'm going to do is put some links in the chat.
And we'll circulate those too for folks.
They can be shared out, shared out through the newsletter. But it's just a starting point. You know, if you want to go and read all of the different calls to action, the truth and reconciliation calls to action, that's a great place to start. And you talked about that at the beginning of the show, that's something you want to spend time doing tomorrow, a day that is really set aside for awareness. That's great. You know, that's wonderful. And for me personally, to hear that, it's really touching when I hear people say those things. People are experiencing this in their own ways. Some people in the community might feel kind of loud and want to share and want to express. For me, I want to get quiet and I want to reflect and I want to listen. You know, listening to you speak about what will be meaningful for you tomorrow, that's meaningful to me. I don't represent all First Nations people or everybody, of course, right? So it really is just about your intention behind your action. So what is intentional for you? Are you seeking information? Are you going to go onto YouTube and just listen to some more of those videos about truth and reconciliation? Are you going to, sort of reflect and think about what is it that I don't know? Do I need a historical account of what has happened? Do I need more information about the people who are affected? Do I need to know about how this is a current issue, how people are struggling today? Do I need to take some action? Like, it's just, I think we're all on a different path.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably one of the reasons why, for some folks that I've heard, and I've spent a lot of time in spaces where there are webinars being taught about decolonization and lived experience and all of those things over the pandemic, because they've been very accessible to me. And I thought, well, there's no time like the present to start learning about things that I don't know. But I also know that the process seems daunting, right? Like, it's when you don't know where to start. So thank you for giving us, just a place to just, to jump in. Because I think oftentimes, we talk about this in the disability experience all the time. We talk about this in audio description all the time. It's like, if you wait to be perfect, you'll never do it, right? If you wait for that moment, for the perfect moment, it'll never happen. And so you just really have to dive right in. Friends, if you have some questions that you'd like to ask of Deanna in this space, we are inviting that into the conversation. Deanna, what is it that you're going to do tomorrow? I recognize the day is not for Indigenous peoples to observe and for the rest of us to do the work, but is there something that you're planning to do with family or?
Thank you for asking. I drove, I'm a student. I've gone back to school after a long career in teaching. And so I drove after my class to Merritt, to my house, and I'm sitting with my aunt and my mom. We are going to the grounds of the residential school tomorrow, where there is going to be a ceremony held to really just honor the missing children and be a community. So for me, my need at this time is really to connect with my family and to do that in a space that feels relevant. So this is where I need to be tomorrow. I need to be there. I need to be standing on the land, and I need to be healing with my family and my people.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. You know, as a person who does the land acknowledgement every week, I'm always trying to find ways of connecting to that acknowledgement so that it's not just a bunch of lip service, and also so that it's meaningful to me. And for very long, actually, until the week that you joined us, we were acknowledging all of the unmarked graves by number at the different former residential schools that had been found, because it was happening live in our history and was very unknown for a lot of us. But, you know, again, my relationship as a person with an equity seeking person, and I'm being impacted by systemic issues with disability, there are things that are relatable. So for example, I could, you know, we were told by Indigenous peoples that this was not new to Indigenous peoples. You've known about this for a long time. And the rest of us are like, what? How did this happen? Right now, today, we're like, what? How did this happen? Whereas I think there's parallels in the disability community, and I'm not trying to take away focus from the lived experience of Indigenous folks and folks that were in residential schools. But I think allyship becomes much more important to me when we have these conversations, and how I can be an ally to a community that is not part of my lived experience, and how you can be an ally in my community if it's not a part of your lived experience. I wonder if you're comfortable, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know you're with family. If you're comfortable sharing any of the impacts that some of this has had on your family as of late, or in its entirety of your existence.
Well, I won't speak for other people, but I'll speak for myself.
Yeah.
And when 215 happened, the Kamloops Residential School is the first school to declare that we found these unmarked graves. That school is the school that my mom attended and my grandfather attended. So it was really deep hitting, of course. And it affected everybody in our country. I don't know how it couldn't. But for me to be in a space of, you know, education and teaching students who I love, it was really hard to be in front of them. And I just saw it as an opportunity to be very honest. Because I think sometimes when we see through always when we see through somebody else's eyes, you have a better opportunity to connect with the information. So in that capacity, in an education setting, I feel like I was able to like gently guide the students through the experience a little bit. But personally, I got really, really quiet. I mean, I think people in the visually impaired community or blind community would feel that sometimes you just feel vulnerable. A lot of times, maybe you feel vulnerable, and you are being focused on as a community. So the focus was really about that for many months. You know, conversations and media and awareness. There was so much conversation. I was in a perpetual state of feeling vulnerable and looked at and talked about, and I felt quiet. So, and I'm helping in this context right now, helping and educating and guiding. That's my area of specialty, right? I'm a teacher. Unless I'm in that space, then I have to put on a brave hat to be more of an advocate. I have to wear that, and I'm not always in the space to do that. Mostly, I think for me personally, it's been a really quiet, reflective, sad experience.
Can I, you know, honoring that this is a safe space, can I just ask you about language? Because when I read out the call to action number 80, the government used the word Aboriginal, and you use the word Indigenous and First Nations. And I'm just wondering about language in terms of, you know, what are best practices for folks who aren't a community member to be using?
Indigenous is pretty safe, right? It encompasses a bigger group of people, whereas I'm First Nations. I'm not. So if you want to say Aboriginal or Indigenous, that's going to encompass and be more conclusive. You know, that this inclusive, sorry, it includes more groups of people.
Okay. I thank you for allowing me to ask the question in a space like this, because sometimes I find I have questions and I feel icky about asking them because, you know, I want to learn too, but not everybody wants to be your teaching moment. So thank you for taking that opportunity to be our teaching moment. Any last things that you'd like to share with us about your experience or tomorrow and the importance of tomorrow before we let you enjoy your night
I think
with your family?
I think sometimes it's important to give yourself permission not to know. Like, isn't that a really beautiful thing to be able to humbly and open-heartedly say, I don't know, and give yourself permission to not know. Yeah. And then in that space of like acceptance that, you know, I don't have to feel ashamed that I don't know these stories. I don't have to feel ashamed that I don't have this information. Then you can like kindly and humbly, gently seek information. And it doesn't feel as scary when you approach new learning like that, you know? So that's what I would encourage people to do, is just to get a little curious and really to like hold a tenderness for the people who are really struggling, because as I said, this isn't a past issue, it's current. And when it comes down a family line for so many generations, the impacts are greater than anybody is going to tell you about. You know, like it comes down to just a way of being. So I think just being really humble and asking questions. And if your strength is advocacy, then that's a different thing. But, you know, if your strength is to just reflect and learn, then do that.
You know, I just before we jumped onto the call tonight, there was this bit on the news, and I apologize. You know, I'm gonna be watching the news again later. I have it recorded, but there was an Indigenous woman talking about orange shirts and highlighting the fact that there were a certain number of orange shirts released that were I don't even have the language to use this, but there was a series of sort of imposter orange shirts that were also released that were sold for the wrong intention, and the money didn't go to where it was supposed to go to, and know where you're buying your orange shirt from. And I, again, like that was one of those things where I think to myself, really? Why would anybody do that? Like, why would anybody? But there are, you know, anything that is done for a reason of good and purity and to reflect also can get taken advantage of. And so I don't, you know, again, I'm putting you on the spot, but I wonder, are there certain places, if we want to own one of these orange shirts, where we can get them from, that is the right place to get them from?
There are many, many right places. There are many are maybe not from the community who are selling shirts and donating to the community. Even I think Staples. I know I've seen a lot of that content coming across my screen, and somebody had said, oh, you know, Staples, I can't believe they're selling these shirts. But I think particularly that company is donating 100% of the profit to residential school survivors. So it's really just about doing a little bit of research. If you see something on a Facebook marketplace, I would be a little, you know, leery.
Yeah.
The world is the world, you know. It is what it is. It might not be right, but many things are not right. You know, I always follow the path of just going with good intention in your heart. So if you feel drawn to a group, there are, I know Shop Indigenous, it's like Shop Indigenous items or something. There's a Facebook group where you can source like indigenous made items and belongings and crafts and all kinds of things, cultural artwork. There's another group, Taking Action. It's a group in Kamloops. I can't remember because I don't have it in front of me, but it's something about taking action. I know people post in that group and just say, you know, here's some shirts. These ones are available. My cousin is selling something. This is like authentic. Just look around.
maybe what we'll do is as a VocalEye team, we can maybe find a couple of those links that you're talking about and circulate them. So they're at people's quick disposal for places. We have one hand from Nancy, and then I'm going to close the conversation. So Nancy, go ahead and ask your question of Deanna.
Can you hear me?
Can hear you.
Okay, now we can't wear any kind of orange shirt for tomorrow?
Of course you can. Yeah, you
Because-
can. You can.
You can? Okay, thank you. Because I thought, oh my God, I don't have one of those shirts. But my son is Native, and I'm going to show him the love that I had that I never had when I was a kid. But you know what? I feel that he's very quiet, and he, you know, he's 24, going to be 25, and he just moved out, and it's been touching me and hurting me. But now I have to let him go. But the sad thing is, I'm, you know, listening to all this stuff in the news and everything else. It really I want to show him that I love him. And that, you know, love means a lot to me now. I've never been loved when I was a child, but start to reach out to my children and all my friends that is juggling through this right now. It's very touching. You know, you go to school when we were kids and we hung around with, you know, and back now, you're right. We used to call it Aboriginal because I took Nate's Aboriginal classes. Now I try to ask, what's that word they're saying? Because I can't even say it. But no, that must have just happened just recently because I've never heard of it.
Language is ever evolving and ever changing, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Nancy. Deanna, thank you for providing some context. Thank you, Tung, some lived experience, and just for spending time with us in this space, having this discussion. I think it's often a discussion that we don't get to have in a safe place. So I really appreciate your lens on this whole conversation. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that VocalEye cares about this specific day and really wants to bring some awareness to the community. I think that's wonderful. I just want to share before I go that when I say all my relations lift, my elbows are pointed down and my hands are pointed up. That really represents paddles. So as one group of First Nations people would be approaching another group across the water, they would raise their paddles to show I come in peace. So I'm showing you like all my relations, and that means we are all connected. You are all of my relations.
You've given me goosebumps, Deanna. That makes me feel very welcomed. Thank you for that. With that, I will invite you to stick around while the community has a little check-in before we say goodnight. But thank you for bringing this conversation to our space in such a safe way.
Good night.
Good night.